storyteller.
Alright, so listen up, because this isn't just some old folktale. Loftus Hall in Ireland, deeply intertwined with English aristocratic history, already has a reputation for chilling legends, particularly the one about the devil's visit. But for those unfortunate enough to truly experience it, the devil's tale is just a smokescreen for a far more tragic and horrifying reality. Deep within its cold, decaying corridors lurks the presence of the glowing boys. Not one, but multiple child spirits who died wrongful deaths, and their appearance? It's a bone-chilling omen of demise. On a freezing winter night in the 1970s, a man named Arthur was hired as a temporary caretaker for the dilapidated castle, then undergoing renovations. Arthur was a seasoned, cynical man, a disbeliever in ghosts, who saw the job merely as an escape from the world's clamor. But Loftus Hall's silence was anything but peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. From his very first night, Arthur sensed something profoundly wrong. The wind howling through shattered window panes wasn't just wind. It was a mournful wail, like a mother crying for her lost child. Then, more specific sounds began. Small, hurried footsteps, a light tap, tap, tap across the wooden floorboards upstairs, as if a child were playing an endless game of hide and seek in the infinite darkness. Sometimes, pressing his ear to the cold stone wall, he could discern faint whispers, indistinguishable syllables laced with a desperate sorrow, like prayers centuries forgotten. The terror peaked on a new moon night when absolute darkness engulfed the castle. As he patrolled the main hall, an unnatural cold gust swept past Arthur's neck, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. The few flickering candles in the room wavered, then dimmed to almost nothing, as if an unseen entity was sucking the very oxygen from the air. And then, from the end of the corridor, a faint light emerged. It wasn't warm like fire, but chilling, morbid. A small, indistinct figure slowly materialized from this luminescence. It was a boy, perhaps 7 or 8, clad in tattered, rough cloth. The most horrifying aspect was that his entire body emitted a sickly, murky green glow, a spectral luminescence of decay, not illuminating anything around him, but only making his form appear more ethereal, more distorted, almost translucent. He didn't walk. He seemed to float inches above the floor. Arthur stood rooted to the spot, his throat dry, every instinct screaming at him to flee. The boy didn't look at him. His eyes were two hollow, vacant black pits, fixed on a stained, crumbling patch on the opposite wall. He drifted slowly, deliberately, towards Arthur, each movement unhurried, aimless. His sickly halo intensified with every spectral inch, and Arthur felt an overwhelming wave of profound sorrow, utter loneliness, and a knowing hunger radiating from him, invading his very thoughts. When the boy was just a few feet away, he abruptly stopped. His small head slowly, mechanically, turned towards Arthur. In that chilling moment, Arthur faced not a child, but the embodiment of abandonment and death. The boy's hollow, vacant eye sockets seemed to have been gouged out from within, and a thick, viscous black liquid oozed from them, trailing down his pale, ashen cheeks. His mouth opened in a silent scream, but Arthur could feel it, a horrific pressure on his chest, a primal shriek of hunger, cold, and the ultimate pain of a child left to die in the dark. The cold radiating from him pierced Arthur to the bone, carrying with it the overwhelming stench of damp earth, mildew, and decaying flesh. Arthur fled that very night, leaving all his belongings behind, never daring to look back. For years, he remained haunted by that image. The sensation of facing the glowing boy wasn't just fear. It was an overwhelming empathy for a tiny soul that had endured a monstrous death. Legend says these children were the fruits of forbidden liaisons by the lords of the castle, imprisoned in secret rooms, starved to death to conceal the family's dishonor. Now, they still wander, emitting that morbid light of decomposition, a perpetual, chilling reminder of a crime that can never be absolved, a silent scream that haunts the very stones of Loftus Hall. Rainham Hall in Norfolk, England, is home to one of the most famous and controversial ghost photographs of all time. The Brown Lady, believed to be the spirit of Lady Dorothy Walpole. Her tragic story, imprisoned by her jealous husband until her death, has been told countless times. But there's a far more agonizing and terrifying dimension to her haunting that few dare to speak of. She is not alone. Her haunting is also the haunting of her lost children. In the early 2000s, a team of seasoned paranormal investigators, not amateur ghost hunters, but serious researchers armed with infrared cameras, EMF meters, and thermal sensors, secured permission for an overnight vigil at Rainham Hall. They meticulously set up their equipment, focusing particularly on the Grand Oak staircase, where the Brown Lady was most frequently sighted. The air inside the sprawling hall felt heavy with an ancient sorrow, and the portraits of the Walpole family seemed to watch them with stern, condemning eyes. The first few hours passed in suffocating silence. Then, abruptly, the audio recorder placed at the top of the staircase captured a sound. It wasn't a whisper, but the heartbreaking, visceral sound of a woman sobbing, a sound of such profound anguish that it sent shivers down everyone's spine. David, the team leader, a man hardened by years of investigating, motioned for silence and followed the source of the cry. As he reached the foot of the staircase, the temperature plummeted dramatically, his breath clouding in the sudden chill. A cold mist began to coalesce in the middle of the staircase, swirling like a miniature vortex. And then she materialized from the swirling vapor, a translucent, almost ethereal figure of a woman in a sweeping brown satin gown, slowly descending. Her face was a blur of grief, an indistinguishable mass of anguish. But what truly horrified David were her eyes. Her eyes weren't there. Only two deep, abyssal black holes remained, as if they had been cruelly gouged out from within. She was the very embodiment of torment and despair. But that wasn't the true horror. Just as the Brown Lady's form became distinct, two tiny child ghosts, even more transparent than she, appeared directly behind her. A boy and a girl, their faces deathly pale, contorted in an eternal scream of terror. They were clinging, clawing at the non-existent fabric of her gown, their small, desperate fingers futilely grasping at empty air. It was a silent hell. David, with his heightened sensitivity, not only saw, but felt their silent screams reverberating directly in his mind. Not one, but two overlapping wails, a horrifying chorus of pure panic. "Mummy, don't leave us. It's so cold, Mummy." The Brown Lady was utterly oblivious to them. Her hollow, vacant eye sockets remained fixed on David, as if she were searching for her tormentor, while her ghostly children forever clung to her, in a desperate, unending loop, ignored by their own grief-stricken mother. It was a perpetual, heartbreaking drama of a shattered family, cursed to repeat their torment for eternity. David's team packed up their equipment and evacuated immediately, no one speaking a word. The experience had transcended mere paranormal research. It was an intrusion into a profound and horrific family tragedy. It's believed that Lady Dorothy was not only imprisoned, but brutally separated from her beloved children, who may have died from illness or been deliberately harmed by their cruel father to eliminate any trace of his wife. Now they are cursed to reenact that tragedy forever within Rainham Hall. The mother's soul wanders, endlessly seeking vengeance and release, while her children eternally cling to her, trapped in the final, agonizing moment of separation, their cries of "Mummy," forever unheard. Okay, so this isn't some dusty old tale from a forgotten graveyard. This is modern, chilling, and it happened on Interstate 5, that long stretch of highway carving its way down the west coast of the U.S., specifically the desolate Oregon portion where the infamous I-5 killer Randall Woodfield hunted in the 80s. He was a flesh and blood monster, and many of his victims, they became literal ghosts. Among the grim whispers of long-haul truckers, there's a particularly heartbreaking and deeply unsettling story. The ghost of a little girl, his youngest victim, still wanders that desolate stretch of road, a chilling warning from beyond the grave. Frank, a seasoned truck driver, was on his usual overnight run to Seattle. The night was an inky black abyss. Rain was coming down in sheets like tiny pebbles thrown against the windshield, making the highway slick and eerily solitary. The trees on either side of the road formed a solid black wall, swallowing all light and sound. Frank was in a semi-trance, hypnotized by the monotonous rhythm of his wipers. Suddenly, his truck's headlights swept across a small, motionless figure standing at the side of the road. Frank jolted, his heart skipping a beat, slamming on the brakes and swerving hard. The massive truck shrieked to a horrifying halt. It was a little girl, no more than 6 or 7, wearing a flimsy, light yellow summer dress, completely soaked and caked in mud. Her blonde hair was matted, plastered to her pale face. Overriding his fear, Frank rolled down his window. "Hey, kid, what are you doing out here all alone?" he yelled over the storm. The girl just shivered violently, her lips trembling and blue with cold, whispering softly that she was lost and looking for her mommy. Moved by compassion, Frank opened the cabin door. "Get in, kiddo. I'll call the police for you. Get warm first." A blast of icy cold air entered the cabin with the girl. She silently climbed into the passenger seat, huddled, chillingly quiet. She whispered her name was Mary. Frank felt a deep unease. The girl wasn't just shivering from the cold. It seemed to be a tremor born of deep-seated terror. Frank turned to grab his radio, his back momentarily to her. And when he turned back, she was gone, vanished completely. No sound, no trace, except for a small puddle of water on the passenger seat cushion, and on the floorboard, a single muddy, worn-out white child sneaker. In the puddle, something gleamed faintly red, diluted, looking unmistakably like blood. Frank's heart hammered like a war drum against his ribs. He stared at the empty seat, cold sweat trickling down his neck, trying to comprehend what had just happened. In a desperate, panicked move, he instinctively glanced into the passenger side mirror, a trucker's habit, and then he saw her, Mary, standing right outside the passenger door, under the relentless downpour. But this time, her face wasn't innocent or lost. Her eyes were wide, gaping black holes of unspeakable, pure terror, as if she was staring at an actual demon. Her mouth was open as if to scream, but no sound came. And she wasn't looking at Frank. She was staring, fixated, at the utterly black space behind his truck. Just then, Frank's radio crackled to life, static-filled, and a faint, distorted whisper, like it was spoken underwater, hissed through the speakers. Only one chilling word. Run ... single quotes. Immediately after, her translucent form shimmered, wavered, and vanished into the pouring rain, as if she had never been there at all. Frank didn't need any more warnings. He slammed the accelerator, driving like a madman, the massive truck roaring through the night, leaving that stretch of deadly road far behind. Days later, still shaken to his core, he compulsively researched the I-5 killer's victims. His blood ran cold when he read about one of the unidentified cases. A little girl, approximately 7 years old, found in a ditch near the very area he had stopped, wearing a yellow dress. The ghost of Mary isn't a vengeful spirit. She is a warning. A tragic, eternally trapped soul, forever reliving the last horrifying moments of her life, forever trying to save others from the unseen evil that still lurks on Interstate 5.